to this very special session, which is a billion Fireflies, critical conversations to shape a new post-pandemic world. I'd like to begin by just hoping that each one of you, your colleagues, your families and their families all are keeping safe and keeping well. Please continue to take appropriate, COVID measures, and please keep safe. Thank you all for joining us today in this very important session where we will learn some ideas about transforming the progress of our country. And actually, in my brief interaction with Mr. Arun Maira, I believe it is also applicable to companies, and firms and even families. I think it's all, and as he takes this conversation forward, perhaps some of you will actually understand that. I think these thoughts are penned in Mr. Arun Maira's recent book, A Billion Fireflies, Critical Conversations to Shape a New Post-Pandemic World. Of course, Mr. Arun Maira is a thought leader on social and economic development and transformational change and leadership. He is the author of several books, including Shaping the Future, Aspirational Leadership in India and Beyond, Redesigning the Aeroplane While Flying, Reforming Institutions, Transforming Capitalism, Improving the World for Everyone, Listening for Well-being, Conversations with People Not Like Us. Mr. Arun Maira is currently Chairman of the Board of Trustees of HelpAge International and Chairman of the Foundation for MSME Clusters. He was earlier a member of the Planning Commission of India from 2009 to 2014 and of the National Innovation Council, besides being chairman of the Boston Consulting Group in India from 2000 to 2008. Prior to that, he's worked with Tata Group for 25 years in senior management and board positions. And Mr. Maira has also been the Quality Council, chairman of the Quality Council of India, Save the Children India, and the Axis Bank Foundation. He has served on the boards of the UN Global Compact and several social work organizations and educational institutions and abroad. For me, personally, it's been a long history of association with Mr. Maira, right from days when he was in telco at that time when it was known, and then his transition to the BCG, where I had the pleasure of working with him very closely. And in one of those projects, he actually talked of India as a billion. He thought of three different models of India: peacock, buffaloes walling in the pond, and fireflies lifting the country head. So it's very interesting that he's got this fireflies concept again. It's always a pleasure listening to him. But in today's session, Mr. Maira will share system-based scenarios of India that reveal the paradigm shift necessary for India's progress. His book reveals the need for a better model of leader to catalyze transformative change at all levels of the system, at the bottom, in the middle, and at the top. With that brief introduction, I would like to invite Mr. Arun Maira to initiate the conversation on his book, and hope that all of us present here will act like fireflies to take the message forward. So over to you, Mr. Maira.
Thank you very much, Dilip, and thank you for telling everyone that you and I go back a really, really long way. And also, in part of that journey, mentioning that the process that you and I and Sanjay, who's also with us, Sanjay Roy, were very instrumental in and engaged with to get Indians, and a lot of corporate leaders and economists and people, common people, teachers, farmers and others, and children even, to think together about what is going on in our country, India, and what do we see as the opportunities for people's participation and their own leadership in transforming India to make it good for everyone. So thanks, because that's really what is at the heart of what I would like to share with our friends here today. We have been through a pretty bad year as the world and India. Some say probably worse than most other countries, the COVID crisis, out of which we are not completely out yet. The COVID pandemic has been an enforced electrocardiogram test, revealing the condition of our heart and our systems inside ourselves. ECG, which is economy, capitalism, and governance. We've had the worst year for the Indian economy since our independence, the lowest growth, it's negative, and an all-round low in business confidence, as well as consumer confidence in the last survey just a few weeks ago. On the side of capitalism, it's worth considering that hundreds of millions of Indians have lost their livelihoods in the last 1 year. Average incomes have fallen by 17%, but stock markets have hit record highs. And India's richest billionaires are climbing even more rapidly up the list of the global richest persons. On governance, we have had a tough time. It's a very complex country, and it was an unprecedented crisis. We began with the world's harshest and firmest announced lockdown by our Prime Minister. And in that lockdown, which was to prevent the spreading of the virus around, so many people lost their lives, livelihoods and then lives, for other reasons, trying to prevent the virus going around. Misery just spread around very fast. And poor people are reported to have asked, does the Prime Minister know actually how the poor people of this country really live when he announces these bold measures top down to control things? And now, in the last month, when centralization is required to use purchasing bulk to be able to get standard vaccines, which everyone needs, the same vaccine everywhere, it's a good decision to take centrally. The government let it go and told the private sector to buy the vaccines as well as the states to go buy the vaccines, and thus reduced the bargaining power on behalf of the people in the procurement of the vaccines. And of course, that's being reversed hopefully now. So there's a confusion about how one governs a complex system. What sort of decisions should be taken centrally and what are best taken somewhere else in other ways. And globally too, the WTO, which is there to coordinate trade around the world and lay down the rules, is some people say in the ICU and someone say that it's actually on the way to the morgue already. McKinsey, in looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, which lay out the global agenda for the improvements required in so many things, in so many aspects of our environment, in so many aspects of economies, and so many aspects of our societies, say that if we keep carrying on trying to make improvements at the pace we are, it will take us till 2091 to achieve the SDGs. And of course, the other scientists predict that by the carbon in the atmosphere and the heating of the earth, we want to be there till 2091. So it's a very theoretical exercise. What needs to be done, therefore, is finding a new way to manage change in many things together, all at the same time. In India, we've got to improve public health. We don't need just more five-star hospitals, which do provide world-class healthcare, and people come from other countries to get it. But healthcare that's available to all the citizens of India and prevents them from getting to such hospitals, actually. We need primary education widely in all rural areas and not just world-class science institutes. We need far better water management. Even in the most prestigious cities, there's been a problem in Bombay for the last 40, 50 years. Here where I live in Gurgaon, it's becoming acute. Of course, we rich people don't notice it. We use technology to get water for ourselves, and in the course of that, depriving others who don't have money and access to the facilities we have from very basic things like water. Affordable housing, We had a finance infrastructure to enable small enterprises, even single persons, the hawkers who are entrepreneurs, to be able to run their own businesses more effectively, more efficiently. And farmers' incomes outside our cities, it's a big issue. We need to make changes in so many things all together. So here's the problem, and therefore I'm going to talk about the ECG, but I'm going to do it backwards. I first talk about governance, then we talk about a bit about the crisis in capitalism, and then to economics and the need to really get economics, the profession of economics, out of its box. So let's take the first one, Dilip, Vikash, if you just jump to the slide, please. Yeah, we're going to do an ECG of the economy. If you do it on a screen and take the first slide.
Vikas, you can move to a slideshow. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So here, thanks. The next slide. Thank you. This is something which Dilip, you'll recognize, and Sanjoy also. You mentioned already, Dilip, about peacocks and buffaloes and fireflies. Well, here they are. This is a analysis of 4 ways by which large-scale change is brought about. The one on the top, the picture on the top, shows a lot of buffaloes all wallowing together in the pond. There's a comfortable place to be on a hot summer day. And there's a child on the outside representing many children, Indian children, waiting for cleaner water, better nutrition, better education, and so on. And these buffaloes inside are the people on the top, maybe members of our cabinet, ministers, of our planning commissions, our experts, who are given the responsibility to figure out solutions for the children of the country and the citizens of the country. And they don't seem to be able to find the solution, or when one buffalo rises, like the one in the middle there, and says, look, I have got the solution, the other buffaloes around say, well, I don't quite agree with you. And so this buffalo is unable to make the solution implemented, and settles down. And then another buffalo gets and says, but now I have the solution. And the first buffalo says, but you never cooperated with me, so I'm not going to support your solution. So the buffaloes are wallowing around. They've got ideas and information and the power given to them, but we cannot get to a consensus. And we are unable to implement change. And the children are waiting, and they're waiting. So this model of leadership, which is people at the top who have the knowledge and are given the power, bringing about change. Now, we would say that this was the model of trying to make India better when we had top-down planning. And it's a model used in corporations, of course. We put the big guys on the top, the experts, and they devise this schemes and strategies and ensure that people down the line implement them. This wasn't working in India, like we said. So we had in 1991 said, well, throw out this top-down Soviet-sounding planning, and let's join the market, the free market. In the free market, the concept is that you throw open the market, and therefore there will be opportunities, let's say more grains of wheat on the ground. And you want it basically for the sake of the poorest birds, at least in a poor country like India. But who gets to the grains first, the new, more grain that's available? It's people who already have the power to get the grains. That is, people who already have some wealth, which they can use to invest and get more wealth, or people who already have some positional power can then use their positional power to grab more things for themselves or their friends. So the peacocks, who are the people with the power, and I'm using the peacock as the image of the big bird because it's also a glamorous bird. It's a glamorous bird. So this began to happen, that the people who had more wealth, a little wealth, could invest and get more wealth, or could buy the assets now available and use them and make more wealth for themselves. The birds flying around the peacock are like pigeons. They're pretty big and can look after themselves somewhat, but not against a peacock. But the birds who really suffer are the very tiny sparrows, for whose sake really we wanted to improve the way the economy was functioning. And they kept waiting to say, I hope these big guys have eaten enough and we leave something for us little fellows to also eat. So this is the theory which says that, well, feed the greed of the rich, because then they will do more. And there will be some trickle down. I don't know how, from where, there will be trickle down to the people below. But what's been happening is that the trickle down has been much slower than the increase of the wealth at the top, not just in India, but around the world. So the inequalities have been increasing within countries and between countries also, and Piketty and others have documented this. No one can contradict that now. So this model of peacocks strutting while the little birds are scrambling around was the situation into which India came since the 1990s. We are admiring the people who have wealth. We describe them as the wealth creators. And I'll come soon in talking about capitalism, but wealth creators for whom? Side by side is a picture of another form of leadership with power, muscle power, tigers in the jungle. And they can, frighten anybody and get to eat when they want to eat in the jungle. Around them are also clever animals like wolves, who also in their packs can get together and get what they want, except they don't fight the tiger. And they're little animals, squirrels and rabbits, who again are just eaten up by the others and too frightened. So this picture of change with power, Dadagiri, was evident to us, Dilip, if you remember, and Sanjoy, when we did these scenarios. That time you were talking about the Naxal movement. 1/3 of India was with the Maoists and the Naxals, where it was all jungle, yes. And there, the power of the gun ruled. And we also as a state trying to use the gun against the tigers in the jungle. And there was a clarity that actually both these pictures go together. Somehow, where there is more unbridled capitalism, violence also breeds. And it's partly to do with the sense that I should be aspiring for more things, more wealth for myself. And it's okay to cut corners like the big guys also seem to do. That's the smart thing to do. I'll do the same. And if you can't get it in that way, just grab it, steal it, buy guns and shoot others to get it. And the violence has been growing in India since then, even in our cities. Violence against women grab a woman tonight. I have a woman tonight, why? Grab a smartphone from somebody's purse right now because I want the new one, and so on. So this model of large-scale change of leaders who got muscle power and leaders who got wealth power is the model that we have slipped into. There's an orange light there. Huh? From the red, we came to the orange. There's a warning here. And we were concerned, as Dilip and Sanjay, you remember. But I must say that, we thought of it then when the World Economic Forum came to India in 2008 and said, look, people say that India will had stopped shining, but that India nevertheless is going to be in the BRICS and economies, one of the largest in the world. And we must understand what's going on beneath the surface, what's happening beneath the numbers. So they came to the same pictures and said, these are the forces that are shaping India. They called this scenario, this combination of peacock strutting and tigers growling as Bollywood. They said this is like a Bollywood movie. There's a lot of glamour in the movie and there's a lot of violence in the movie. It's good fun to watch, but it's not very pleasant to be in it. Is there another way to produce large-scale change? And that's where, by looking inside ourselves, looking inside India and looking elsewhere in the world, also beneath the glamour, beneath the numbers, we found that there were many people who were producing change in small ways, in their own communities, in their own villages, in small things. And they were doing it not because they had the resources to make change. They wanted to, they cared about the conditions of themselves and the people around themselves. And they were stepping up with the little resource that they had to give light around themselves. That's why the metaphor, the image of the firefly. And we realized that the more the numbers of fireflies that will rise across India, the faster will the darkness of India be turned to light. So there are four models for large-scale change, and there are four models of leaders, each going along with the model of change. So this is what we must consider about reverting the model of governance in our corporations and in the world. The first two models, if you notice, all of the first three are top-down. The buffaloes are on top, the experts and people with position on the top. The wealthy people are on top. The people with muscle power are on top, and they're all throwing their weight onto the people below or asking the people below to take their directions. The fireflies arising is a bottom-up leadership model. We need both. And as I mentioned to you about handling the COVID, there's some situations where we do need some top-down discipline, but the most of the situations, like the situations which we have in the Sustainable Development Goals, require local system solutions collaboratively implemented by communities, and then only we will be able to solve our global systemic problems faster. We need a new way of projecting how fast we are going to be able to change the world by thinking of a new way of changing the world. Then I assure you that we won't have to wait till 2090 or whenever it was that McKinsey said we will achieve the SDGs. We might do it in the next 20 years. We have to. We have to. So this is about governance. Now, can I take the next slide, please? Capitalism. We talk in the environmental world about the circular economy, where we say that any material that you use in your production process should circulate. It should be transformed to become usable again in the physical economy. Nothing should choke up in any part of the system. And thus, plastics, single-use plastics, have become a problem for the environmental sustainability of the world. Single-use plastic is a beautiful invention. It's light, it enables things to be protected, it's to have hygiene, it's very convenient, but it must circulate. It must not be allowed to accumulate in streams, in oceans, because then it chokes up the circulation of the waters, the oxygen for the fish, and so on, and the whole earth becomes weaker. Now, I'm going to use the same idea about circulation. In the case of the environment, it's materials and energy circulation. I'm going to look at the economy. In the economy, it's the circulation of wealth. Now, here is the situation. The wealth that forms in the hands of investors comes from where? It comes from activities in which lots of people participate. I'm talking about small enterprises, workers, and so on. They put in effort, and there's a cost which has to be paid for, and there's a surplus generated. And the surplus is then taken by the person who invested the money. And so those profits go up and they convert into the wealth of financial investors. This process of taking profits and then converting those profits into wealth has been accelerating as the real economy became a more financial economy around the world. And it's the wealth that's accumulating in the hands of financiers, and quite often it's just digital wealth, and nowadays it's Bitcoin wealth even maybe, not real wealth, but it is wealth which gives you power to use it to do many things in the political system and on the ground also. Now, we want that wealth to circulate. How does that wealth circulate? One is, well, you tax. It's been the very usual thing. That you tax those who have the money and can pay for the public goods, and you tax them, and then the government uses those taxes on behalf of the people to produce public goods which are good for them, the education, health, infrastructure, public services for all those people down there. But if the thesis is that taxing the wealthy people is going to reduce their incentive to make more money, hopefully if they're using that money wisely to improve the lives of others, which they don't do enough, but don't stop them from making more money. Otherwise, there will be nothing to share. First, grow the pie, and then you distribute it. But at the moment, the top of the pie seems to be just growing, and the distribution is not happening fast enough. We had in India the idea that, look, tax the companies directly, otherwise, towards CSR, and we take 2% of their profits, net profits, and that 2% of net profits will go down to doing things which are directly useful to the people. And the 2% of CSR, 2% of the profit would be, let's say, 0.2% of the revenues of a company. It's the 100% revenues, how were they generated? 100% revenues include prices people paid. It includes the covered in the income tax, the revenue accounts, the salaries paid to people, etc. So that's the side. The impact of the revenue generation on the society and the environment is what one should be paying more attention to. Is that helping or harming a society? Rather than saying, well, you do what you like, but you go at the end of the week to the temple and you give this little donation, this 0.2%, and then you're clean, your conscience is clean for the rest of the week and keep carrying on what you were doing. The other, it has been happening because the wealth of the financial investors has been increasing into the hundreds of billions. Some of them have really generously created philanthropic foundations. So they got, some billions of dollars in them. And from those philanthropic foundations, they don't give all of it back. They give wisely, maybe a few hundred million or less than that sometimes, back into, social ventures and philanthropic ventures that they do. So there are amounts coming down, but they're so small compared to the rush up of wealth from the bottom to the top. So what's the solution here? We want to have a fair generation of wealth everywhere in the system. And so the wealth must be generated at the bottom also. How is that to happen? If the people who are working on the bottom, have enterprises on the bottom, or just working even at the bottom, are able to get the surplus from their work more into their accounts as their wealth, then they would have the ability to use that wealth in ways they want to for further investment in their own enterprises or for other things that matter to them. And so they have more agency, they're able to stand on their own. Now, this was Gandhiji's model. He said he was not a socialist. He hated the idea of top-down management in companies as well as, of course, in countries. And he said, I want the people to be owning their own enterprises. Let them, like entrepreneurs, take the decisions that are good for them and for their families, and thus generate, goodness for others and for themselves too. This was Adam Smith's original idea also, with the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker in the community. They exchanged and traded with each other. They were investing in their own businesses and selling things to each other which others wanted. And so the system would be a good system, a fair system, a good social system. And this was Gandhiji's model also. We therefore need to change the design of the capitalist corporation to make it less selfish. Every religion says that you must think of others before you think of yourself. This is morality too. But we've designed by law an individual, a citizen of society called the limited liability company, which is given all the rights of citizens to own property, to sue others, freedom of speech. But it's required by law. The board of the limited liability company is required by law to maximize the benefits for the investors in the company. I've been a director of independent companies, and I know I could be taken to court if the decisions I took were proven by some investors to have harmed the investors. Okay, so we have to change the nature of the corporation to make it more owned by the people who are in the corporation doing the work, or the suppliers to the corporation. And these models are available, but we haven't been glamorizing them. We rather glamorize the peacocks who made as unicorns, some billions and so on and so forth. So I'm leaving this question before us. What are we going to do to make capitalism more inclusive? Next slide is about the economy. I'm a physicist, actually, by training, did my master's in physics, but then joined Tatas, where all my physics relevance was to observe people doing engineering and producing some wonderful things, and designing and producing wonderful things. and then went on to being a consultant, where sort of physics went further and further into the background. But there only as a consultant, I began to encounter the field of systems thinking, organizational learning, and systems thinking. Meanwhile, the field of economics, I'm talking since the 1960s when I was in college, also developed in its own way and became, as we all know from the Chicago School particularly, and the whole school of quantitative economics, maths and equations in economics, very much like engineering, very much like engineering. Physics had gone through a paradigm shift 100 years ago, when until then it was Newtonian physics and Newtonian mechanics that ruled the natural sciences. In Newton's mechanics, the world consists of objects and components, and they attract each other through some gravity and thus form machine-like constructions. Till Einstein came along and said, there's relativity, and actually nothing is certain out there. Your own position relative to the other will change what you can perceive of the other. And we had, of course, Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, which said if you try to measure something too closely, in fact, you will reduce your ability to measure it. You might even change the condition of that thing. So physics had gone through a fundamental paradigm shift, whereas physicists have been trying to learn to be more like physicists. I mean, economists have been trying to learn to be more like physicists, more mathematical, more predictive in their science. And time has come for economists also to understand that the world is complex. It's composed of human beings who have their own agency, their own emotions, and they, by their interactions, help to shape the system. And economists cannot sit outside like an engineer and say, I'm going to be designing the economy, and I'm going to be, by my models, able to predict that if you do this, that will happen. We can no longer try and manage something as complex as an economy, which has got a social side to it and a power and political side to it, and not just a materials and energy side to it, through, if I fix this one thing, like change the interest rate, somehow the whole economy will be all right. Or if I fix the right price for carbon, somehow the whole environment will be all right. So it's a change in view of ourselves as policymakers, and we are not engineers of a system. We ourselves are humble participants within the system, as are other people around ourselves. So there is another model of systems. The first one, as I've said, is mechanistic engineerable systems. Other is a complex self-adaptive systems. And nature is a complex and self-adaptive system. Everything in nature adapts to things around itself, to conditions around itself, and every other part is adapting to changes brought by others. And so it's a complex system within which there's self-adaptation, and that's what ensures its sustainability. Societies and economies are more like nature. They are not machines. There is a third model of systems, the chaotic systems, which is in which there is apparently no strategy, no visible strategy. Things just happen. The free market idea is an idea of a chaotic system. Just don't leave it alone. Don't regulate. Don't do anything, and good things will happen. But we do know if you just leave it alone, those who presently have some power in it, and they should, it's their intelligence, will use their power to start controlling that system. And so you do get oligopolies and monopolies, and so, which is what's been happening in the global system as well as in the global capitalist system there. So we had, as I said, we jumped in the 1990s in India from the left side, the green, the mechanistic engineerable model of a system, to try to get to the right side of that is, well, leave it to the market. What we really want to have is to be real about the nature of the system in which we are. It's a complex self-adaptive system, and there are rules for governing complex self-adaptive systems. Okay? And those rules for governing complex self-adaptive systems support the idea that I gave you in the first slide, that the agencies must be many, and the people on the ground must have more agency because they are on the ground they understand what could be done immediately to produce a benefit, and they must perceive the benefit. And then there are participants in shaping a better system for everybody. So these are the three parts of the ECG. This last one is about the economy and fundamentally changing the way we think of the economy and govern the economy. The one before that about capitalism, changing fundamentally the concept of capitalism and where the energy of capitalism should lie. And the one before that was about a broader model of large systems change and the governance of large systems change, which the image is more fireflies are rising. So, thanks. Well, these are the books, which the last one is A Billion Fireflies. In my two previous books, Transforming Systems, Why the World Needs a New Ethical Toolkit. We must all, as corporate leaders, consider that ethical decision, that when I am doing something, is it good only for my shareholders and only for me? Who is it good for? And unless it is good for someone else, like Gandhiji said, Antodaya, don't do it till you find something you can do which is also good, very good for someone else first. And the first book that put out there is Listening for Well-Being, Conversations with People Not Like Us. We have got ourselves too much into silos of people who think alike, who follow each other, tweet to each other, and just resonate with each other. And outside our silos are people in their own silos, and they resonate with each other. And we're dividing the world very dangerously between people who can't agree with each other. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Mehra. Sanjay, over to you. Would you like to moderate the question and answers?
Perhaps just to ask Arun if he can give everybody a sense of what is the new thinking, and there's been a lot of thought now across the world, moving towards the SDGs, etc., and looking at corporate governance very differently. Arun, did you want to just touch on some of that before everybody asks questions?
Thank you, thank you. You know, we can all be together on a journey if we are all in agreement of where we want to go. Okay, so having a vision and a goal that we all want to reach is essential before we can start expecting people to start marching along together in a movement of change. So if the goal is, for example, in a company, that we are going to increase the shareholder value of the company. And it's a good goal for the board to have for various reasons. And if we tell everybody in the company, all the workers on the floor and so on, we are all united because we must increase our shareholder value. Now imagine the worker coming to work in the morning says, gosh, I'm really going to put my best into my work because, gosh, I've got to get the shareholder value up. Similarly, in a country, if you tell everybody our goal is to become $5 trillion, and the fellow wakes up and says, I must do my best. Imagine India as a $5 trillion country. There was a terrific cartoon around the time that Sanjay, you and Dalip and I were doing these scenarios by R.K. Lakshman, who would every day in the Times of India write a common man's view. And he had this terrific cartoon, this is 2002, where because India was that time beginning to shine and stock markets were going up. He shows two beggars at the bottom of the Bombay Stock Exchange. And they're looking up and there's three lalas with the dhotis laughing and coming down. And one beggar says to the other, my goodness, now life is going to be very good for us because the stock market has gone up. So a goal which addresses the aspirations of people, what they really need, you must recognize it in the goal, the target to which you're driving the change. And our leaders have to learn to express the goal to which we want everyone to cooperate and come along in new terms. So therefore, there are around the world these greater efforts to say more balanced scorecards for countries based on well-being, all-round well-being, happiness, and so on. Now, what should be in that scorecard can't be decided again by an economist. It must be what people feel matters. And so for the next 3-4 years, please have this in the scorecard of 5-10 years. You can't tell me to reduce the carbon in the atmosphere. Yeah, well, right now, what matters to me is water on the ground. What matters to me is food on the table. So unless I see these as the driving things that you're talking about, not GDP and carbon, I can't see how you're good for me, good for us. So within companies too, we are saying let's have balanced scorecards. Don't be reporting to the stock market. It's required by the law and you must do it. But you must side by side and equally strongly report to the citizens of the country what you are doing with respect to their conditions. This will come from a conversation between people about what matters to us.
And does that in any way change the sensibilities of what we see as an entrepreneur?
Very, very greatly. Thanks for asking that. Yeah, we in India do need entrepreneurship, and we have this slogan about stand up and start up and don't be a job seeker, be a job creator. Well, job creator for myself, and I should create many more jobs for others. That should be my objective. But if I describe an entrepreneur as the person who most quickly gathered some investments from elsewhere and had the fastest exit, as the entrepreneur who we should admire, and that's fine. But if that entrepreneur's methods are going to be the ones that we want everybody to emulate, you're telling everybody how to grab and make more for yourself. So there are entrepreneurs, like Fireflies are entrepreneurs. What are they doing? With very little resource, they are producing change, which seems very difficult. Now, isn't that entrepreneurship? And what is the metrics of this entrepreneur? So you talk again about, the improvements in the lives of others, not in a measure of the success of your enterprise. So we need new models, and they are arising. And I'm saying, Sanjay, since we did those scenarios here in India and reaffirmed again, as I said, by the World Economic Forum, and once again was in the Planning Commission. We once again in the Planning Commission said 2013-14 that the way we're going about planning, we're describing the wrong goals and wrong ways of getting policies made. Let's open up. So we did some exercise on the side with citizens again, asking them, what do you think the goals should be and how would it be brought about? It's reaffirmed those pictures. That is the way to bring about large-scale change. And in that, they're entrepreneurs at the ground, entrepreneurs in the middle, and people on the top who do things differently are an entrepreneur. People who tell me this is how we've done it and I can tell you how to do the same thing better is not an entrepreneur. That's an expert possibly.
Dr. Goyal had a question. Sureshji?
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Arun, I must say I was very impressed with the 3 slides, and particularly the one on the capitalism. And there too, again, the slide, the middle slide, the bottom slide, where you talk about the wages and the other things, the workers. Now, my sense is that eventually for any growth, any economic growth, there is no escape from capitalism. You have to have corporates interested in investing in the economy, in the production processes. But the problem really is what you said the last. How do we make sure that everybody who works in the country, in the corporation feels that he has a stake in this corporation growth? How do we make sure that every individual citizen has a stake in making this country a $5 trillion economy? I compare the situation that the 2 beggars who are sitting at the steps of the Bombay Stock Exchange. It doesn't matter for them if the census goes up to 50,000 or 60,000. Their fate doesn't change. How do we involve them in the process of the growth?
Yeah, thank you, Sureshji. Mahatma Gandhi is for me, and for many now, realizing that what Mahatma Gandhi was developing and proposing to the world to do more of is the solution for the world. He was a Democrat. You can't doubt that. He stood for the weakest person. That's the mark of a Democrat. And helping them for their voices to be heard, again, that's a democratic leader. He said he was a capitalist. As I told you, he wasn't asking that people be workers in some large enterprise and commanded and told what to do there. Nor did he want the government to tell people what to do. Let's go to democracy and capitalism. And this is a key here. Since the last century, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which was the end of history, as Francis Fukuyama put it, because he said the 2 big driving forces that the West has provided to the world, which is democracy, and the other is capitalism, have won forever. But what's happening right now is capitalism is conflicting with democracy. The 2 victors are quarreling with each other because they run on fundamentally different principles. Capitalism Good governance in capitalism is based on the principle of property rights. If you own 70% of something, you must have 70% of the say in how that thing is used. You have $70 in a company, its capital is 100, and you will decide more than those who have small up to $30. Whereas in democracy, we say it's based on human rights. You may own zero, have zero property, or all the property even, but both of you have equal rights in how the society should be governed. Okay, so within capitalist institutions, because they're run by the good governance principles of capitalism, those who have greater ownership of finance and property will have a greater say. But in a democracy, those who own shouldn't be determining too much more about how the whole society is run and the rules of governance of the society. We find this conflicting. Now, in practice, as we know, because of democracy, people take politics and you need money for that. So you get the cronies up there. But let's go back to Mahatma Gandhi. Democracy says good government, democratic government is government of the people, for the people, by the people. A government of the people is a government elected by the people. It's a government formed of the people. And we want the governments to be for the people. Therefore, we keep saying, what good are you doing to the people? Be transparent and so on. And let people challenge you. So that is good, democratic conversations. But the ultimate is it must be government by the people. And as Gandhiji pointed out, the people must govern where they are. I mean, they have their society, their resources. So until we get local self-governance really implemented, we are not going to be, India will not be a democratic society. We said that in the Constitution. We then had the 73rd and 74th Amendment, which is already about 30 years ago. Have we really done it? We keep looking at the top and empowering, more experts up there and giving more power to the people who made wealth too, because they know how to make wealth, to take the decisions. We got to get democracy, that's government by the people, complete that journey. Coming to the business and capitalist side, same principle. It is what? Business for the people, business by the people, business of the people. C.K. Prahlad wrote The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, and he had the case, if you remember, of Hindustan Lever and many others, but Hindustan Lever, what was it? Be smart, be innovative. There is money down there, and unless you change your product and the way you retail it, you can't have access to that fortune. So make it the shampoo in a small sachet and also give it to some Shakti Amas and to sell. And so you will get your shampoo sold in places where otherwise you could not. So you're drawing in, creating a larger market for yourself. But the profit that made out of it, where does it accumulate? Back into, I don't know where the shareholders might be, often Wall Street or in London or wherever. I mean, they don't even know what the Shakti Ama does and who's using all this. So this is the flow up you're pointing out. So we know the present crisis in our country around the world is unless people earn, they will not be able to spend. Why is it that they were spending so little on shampoo? Because they didn't earn enough to buy more shampoo. So the solution has to be to enable people to participate in the creation of more products and so on. Don't displace people by capital by putting a machine, because then you'll begin to worry as the people are to say, but who's going to buy our stuff? Let's give them all universal basic income. Where's the money going to come for universal basic income? From the people who have the money, which is taxed, but they don't want to be taxed. So this is a fool's solution. Unless people are made participants in the creation of the things that they need and the world needs, they will not earn. And if they don't earn, you will not have a market. So we're coming to business, not just for the people and business by the people. This is good. But the people don't own the surpluses being created. It's not businesses of the people. So businesses of the people are like maybe Amul in a way. It's a cooperative. Every buffalo woman owning a buffalo or two, she makes the margin on selling at some price, and she's getting wealthier. So as Gandhiji said, unless people have wealth, they will not have a say in politics. And we need to have universal basic wealth, not so much, than universal franchise.
I think Mr. Kotak, Krishna, you wanted to ask a question? Go ahead.
Thank you. Great presentation. Just a couple of questions and actually points. So you talk about the collective and decentralization. Let's say those are the two concepts which are embedded. Um, what does tend to happen on the ground level is the constant pressure, taking your animal analogy a little bit further, where in the jungle it is the survival of the fittest. Now whether it is fast, adaptable, let's leave that, but certainly the theory of the bigger fish eating the smaller fish is something that smaller companies face on a day-to-day basis. You talked about democracy for the people, by the people, of the people, but also institutional, where the institutions of justice, institutions of governance also needs to therefore be hand in hand with the citizenry. And therefore, the challenge that smaller companies such as ourselves frankly face, to give you a small example, how do you tackle when we go to borrow money and we go to a rating agency? In the past, it was simple. You are a listed company and that happens. Today, the rating agencies actually give us negative points because we are small. Although our governance standards are many a times very much more robust. So how will this dichotomy be tackled in your viewpoint?
Absolutely, well said. I am fighting a war against this concept that big is best. I say small is beautiful. Small is necessary. And therefore, let's consider it beautiful also. Whatever is necessary, let's consider it as beautiful because it's necessary. The small birds and sparrows are beautiful. It's not just the peacock. And so we come to this whole thing about formalization. Yes, I have been with the MSME sector for years and years. This thing that, we must formalize the informal sector. But what is the form that we want to impose on the informal sector? It's a form that we know how to run. We tell small enterprises to register themselves in a certain way so that I, as a bank, can easily understand who they are and deal with them. That process of conforming to the form of the big guys is so costly for and can disrupt the work of the small people. So we have to start the other way, that we've got a ladder. Once you become formal, yes, all the rating agencies and others can help you to judge. All those are already formalized. But not just India. In India, the informal sector is some 80% of the economy. Globally, it is 65%, the informal sector. You know this? Yeah. And in developing countries, generally, it's like we are. Yeah. But even in the richest countries, 30, 40% is an informal sector. But who decides what is to be done? Okay. So we have to change our minds and say, let's listen to this informal sector. Let's ask them what would be the constraints that immediately they want to overcome. They want to overcome. When I was in the Planning Commission, I was quite horrified that the big people in FICCI and CII would say these things, to say, unless you make labor laws flexible, we won't get growth in the company. And I said, at the same time, there are all these surveys done of small enterprises and their associations by the same, BC's, McKinsey's, E&Y, and the government itself. If you just look at those surveys, what do they say is most important? Labor laws doesn't even figure on their list because they're informal. They're talking about credit, like you said. I mean, how do I get, I need the oxygen. Working capital is my oxygen. If I don't have working capital, I can't be in business tomorrow. There's no question of my employing anybody. So first sort out this problem before you tell me the food to eat. So we don't listen to small people. We don't listen to our small enterprises. We are so busy saying, until they become formal, our economy won't become 5 trillion. I'm sorry, chaps. Until you respect them, learn to love them, and support them, you are not going to become a 5 trillion economy, because on the way there, they will have lost their jobs and their incomes, and you won't know who to sell to. It's happening.
I'm conscious that we have a few minutes more. Arun, perhaps you can wrap this up by, you take a lot from Gandhi. And much of the 70 years of our independence, we've seen Gandhi as impractical, certainly in the area of business. And yet you have repeatedly in your books and in much of your conversations and advice have always gone back to Gandhi and used that as the more practical advice. Could you give us, and everybody here at some level is a business leader, can you give us your take on, do you see this, is this a resurrection of Gandhi? Is this Gandhi coming home in the sense of the wisdom that he had of
Yes, I think
the way
Sanjay,
he...
thank you. Sorry, I cut, but this is something I really want to say. You know, it's how Indians respond to, and Indian business people respond to my saying, let's turn to ideas like Gandhi's ideas, and how people internationally. I'm a senior fellow of the Global Solutions Initiative, and we're advising the G20. I must say, in the last 2 years, and especially during the pandemic, they have invited me at their opening plenaries to talk about what we can learn from Gandhi. They're receiving it. And over here, people say, you want us to go backwards? I say, guys, you got to leapfrog. There's been a sort of time, and India should learn. It is us. It was an idea that came out of us. And the whole world is recognizing, and I'm saying all these discussions at the global solutions level, that we need local system solutions implemented by communities to solve these global systemic problems. This is scientifically proven. Then if I smile and say, but isn't that what Gandhiji said? They say, please, Arun, can you give the speech and tell us which book about Gandhi and by Gandhi, which is relevant to business, we will read. And I would say I was invited last year with the Prime Minister to open this conference on globalizing Indian thought, organized by the Indian Institute of Management in Kozhikode, thought. And they invited me just to speak about how Gandhi's ideas are relevant and applicable currently in business. And I gave that speech. And I believe actually for our business people, how to construct these enterprises that we're talking about, which will be good for your business. Because in India, you must employ more people because they're the cheapest resource you can have. Why are you trying to get capital, which is more costly in India than other countries? You're just reducing your competitive advantage, guys. Learn to trust people, learn to make people feel part of the enterprise. They will do their best. The Japanese proved this to the world. We Indians have sort of forgotten. We are getting so wedded to Wall Street, World Bank ideas of capitalist economies.
Well, that's a brilliant way to sort of wrap up this. I'm conscious that we're running out of time. Dilip, over to you. Arun, just to say thank you so much for doing this. I hope there are many more of these conversations of how to ensure inclusivity and empathy in any business model as a path to the future. We've seen that that's worked in so many different ways. And thank you for your book, and for everybody. This is available on Amazon, and of course you can pick it up. And Arun is always available at the end of an email to offer up more advice on this. Dilip, over to you.
So thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Mr. Mehra, for being with us today. And actually, if I can just say, being your usual self. I know you have, in very simple words, in a very simple manner, just using 4 slides. And I think, that's one thing you've not carried forward from your consulting background, is to use a huge deck of 30 slides to convey the message. Here you used 4 slides and lovely pictures to convey the message. I think all the people who joined on the call would have tremendously benefited from your address. And I think collectively, our endeavor should be to make, 1 billion fireflies rise and to transform our country and the world going forward. I think we owe it to, our generation, the next generation, and future generations to enable that to happen. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you all the participants for being here. Thank you, Vikas and Lena and team, for actually taking this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dilip. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vikas.